runway. The camera pans across a line of steel birds under a fading orange dawn, their wings catching the first light of a coming storm. Among the silhouettes of ground crew and officers, there was one figure no one paid attention to, a young woman walking quietly, helmet under her arm, eyes steady but unreadable. No one knew that she was the only F-16 combat pilot stationed on that base, not even the squadron next hangar over. To most, she was just another flight operations officer, the one who handled logistics, signatures, and radio clearances. But war has a way of unmasking people. Like subscribe and click the bell icon for more stories. Her name was Flight Lieutenant Zara Qureshi, 28 years old, calm, analytical, with the kind of silence that made people underestimate her. She rarely spoke unless necessary. When others joked about air combat tactics over lunch, she simply smiled, took her tray, and sat by the window, watching the aircrafts take off. Beneath that quietness was something far heavier, a memory that never left her. 2 years ago, her father, a senior Air Force pilot, was lost during a border skirmish. His last radio transmission was to her, "Never fly with anger, Zara. Fly with purpose." Those were his final words. Now stationed at a remote airbase near the frontier, she was keeping that promise, but not for long, because fate was preparing something no one could predict. The tensions at the border had been rising for weeks. Intelligence briefings spoke of enemy air movements, radar pings too close to comfort, and mysterious night signals. The higher command suspected something was about to happen, but no one expected it would strike their base directly. That morning, she walked past a group of male pilots laughing near the hangar. One of them turned, smirked, and said, "Ma'am, paperwork goes to the left desk." She didn't correct him. She just smiled faintly and kept walking. The camera would follow her boots, steady, deliberate, echoing softly on the concrete floor until she stopped before her F-16, its gray body glistening under morning mist. She reached out, placed a hand on its cold surface, and whispered something only the jet could hear. By sunset, the base would know exactly who she was, and by nightfall, her name would be carved into military history. It was a quiet evening. Too quiet. The kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. In the control tower, radar operators yawned, sipping tea, unaware that the horizon was already burning with invisible heat. Zara sat in the crew room, flipping through her maintenance logs. She wasn't supposed to fly that week. Her name wasn't even on the rotation list. But her instincts were restless. Something didn't feel right. The wind outside had changed direction. The faint hum of the runway lights flickered, and somewhere far away, a siren tested its echo, brief, accidental, almost prophetic. A young lieutenant rushed into the room, breathless, holding a message slip. "Ma'am, radar's showing unidentified contacts, fast movers 30 miles out." Zara looked up, calm but alert. "How many?" she asked. "4, he said, "and they're not squawking friendly." Inside the command center, chaos began to ripple. Orders flew across intercoms. Ground crews scrambled. The squadron leader barked into his headset, calling pilots to scramble their jets. But half the team was away at an exercise site. Only 2 airmen were prepped for immediate takeoff, both rookies. The commander cursed under his breath. "We're short," he muttered. "Too short." Zara stood silently, helmet in hand, eyes fixed on the tactical screen. The blips were closing fast, low altitude, supersonic. Then, without asking permission, she walked to the locker room, unzipped her duffel, and pulled out her flight suit. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was about to do. The fabric smelled of fuel and memory. She zipped it up, clipped her name tag, and tightened her gloves. The moment she stepped out, an older mechanic saw her, stunned. "Ma'am, you can't—" She cut him off with a single look. "Tell the tower," she said softly. "Falcon 21 is going up." The camera would track her as she walked through the dimly lit hangar, alarms blaring in the distance, red lights flashing across her visor. Her boots splashed through puddles from an earlier rain as the canopy of her F-16 lowered, sealing her inside a world of steel, oxygen, and destiny. Within minutes, the engines roared alive, shattering the night's stillness. No one at the base knew yet that the quiet officer from logistics was about to defend their sky. The night erupted into motion. The runway lights flashed like veins of electricity beneath her as Zara's F-16 screamed into the dark horizon. Inside the cockpit, her breathing was steady, measured, the rhythmic inhale of someone who'd done this 100 times in training but never under fire. The control tower's voice crackled through her headset. "Falcon 21, confirm your vector. Repeat, confirm your vector." She didn't answer right away. Her hands moved over the controls with precision, every switch a part of her heartbeat. The camera would follow her jet slicing through the low clouds, its afterburner painting a streak of orange against the night. The ground below was just a blur of lights and panic, but up here it was silence, pure and cold. Then it came, the radar warning tone, sharp and angry. 4 enemy aircraft, MiG-29s, heading straight toward their airspace. They were coming fast. Down in the control room, officers were shouting over each other, still unaware who was airborne. "Who's in Falcon 21?" someone yelled. "It's not on the flight sheet." No one could answer. The commander stared at the screen, frowning, his voice low and uneasy. "Whoever it is, they're already engaging." At 30,000 feet, Zara's eyes narrowed. The radar sweep painted the first MiG contact, 25 miles and closing. She whispered, almost to herself, "Let's see if you're real." Her thumb flicked the master arm switch. The HUD glowed green. She broke radio silence for the first time. "Falcon 21 to control. I have 4 hostiles inbound, engaging." The voice on the other end froze. "Wait, Zara?" But she had already pushed the throttle forward. Her F-16 leapt upward into the dark, cutting through a layer of cloud like a blade. The first missile lock screamed in her headset. Enemy radar tracking her. She dove instantly, pulling 9 Gs, the horizon spinning in a blur. The camera would shake with the turbulence, the glow of her instruments reflecting off her eyes. A second later, she rolled inverted, came around behind the lead MiG and let the missile fly. A blinding flash ripped through the clouds. 1 down. Her breathing grew heavier, her pulse sinking with the rhythm of the sky. 3 left. But on the ground, no one celebrated. Because the radar showed something else. More contacts approaching fast. The commander gripped the radio, his voice breaking. "Falcon 21, return immediately, you're outnumbered." Zara didn't respond. She just whispered to herself, a voice trembling between memory and purpose. "I'm not outnumbered. I'm surrounded." The sky wasn't done testing her yet. The battle had begun. Tracers lit up the night sky like falling stars, and the clouds flashed with distant explosions. Inside the cockpit, Zara could hear her own breath echoing against the mask, quick but controlled. The G-forces pressed hard against her chest as she dove between enemy contrails, countermeasures flaring behind her like angry sparks. The enemy pilots were skilled, veterans. They flew in tight formation, baiting her into missile zones, forcing her to burn fuel faster. But Zara wasn't playing defense. She was studying them, their patterns, their arrogance. The second MiG broke formation to flank her, thinking she hadn't seen it. But she had. She rolled left, let the decoy flares go, and turned hard. The missile missed by meters. The camera would zoom close to her eyes, calm, calculating, then pan to the missile trigger under her glove. 1 squeeze, and a sidewinder launched, spiraling through the blackness. It struck true. The explosion lit the cockpit like daylight. 2 down. On the ground, the airbase finally understood who was in the sky. The commander's hand trembled as he stared at the radar screen. "That's Zara," he whispered. "She's flying alone." The younger officers went silent. The mechanic from earlier, the one who Dee tried to stop her, watched through the hangar doors, eyes wide, whispering a silent prayer. But for Zara, there was no time to think about glory or fear. The radio filled with static. A MiG had her locked again. The warning tone shrieked louder, piercing her thoughts. She dove through a thundercloud, lightning illuminating her jet for seconds at a time. Rain hammered the canopy. She was blind, deaf except for the radar tones, and running on instinct now. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "Fly with purpose, not anger." She steadied her breathing, leveled the aircraft, and climbed. The storm broke open above her, a sea of stars stretching endlessly ahead. And just beyond that piece, another radar contact appeared. The third MiG, waiting, hunting. This time she smiled beneath her mask. "Let's finish this dance." The F-16 roared forward into the stars. The third MiG appeared like a phantom against the horizon, its afterburners cutting through the clouds like knives of blue fire. Zara's radar pinged twice. It had her locked. The missile tone screamed in her headset. Every pilot knows that sound. It's the sound of death racing toward you faster than you can breathe. She pulled the stick hard, the G-forces slamming her body into the seat. Her vision narrowed, darkness creeping in at the edges, but she refused to black out. The missile streaked past, missing her by a whisper. The shockwave rattled her cockpit. The camera would spin with the jet, capturing flashes of lightning and debris, chaos painted across the night sky. Zara's oxygen mask fogged slightly as she gasped for air, but her voice was calm when she spoke. "Control, Falcon 21, Splash 2, engaging third bandit." On the ground, the control tower had gone silent. The commander, still gripping his radio, looked like a man listening to a ghost. No one interrupted him. Every eye in the room was on the radar screen, where one green blip, hers, fought a cluster of red. The MiG tried to climb and loop around, using its superior altitude to gain an edge. But Zara anticipated it. She pulled up, engine howling, matching its move inch for inch. It became a duel, not between planes, but wills. At 35,000 feet, their contrails circled each other like twin dragons, white lines twisting against a black canvas. Then, in a split second, she saw it, a mistake. The MiG's pilot overcommitted to his climb, losing speed. Zara seized the moment. She flipped her jet inverted, dove behind him, and fired. The missile tracked perfectly, closing the gap in seconds. Another flash, another kill. The sky briefly lit up, fragments burning like meteors before fading into the dark. "Splash 3," she whispered. Her voice trembled just once, not from fear, but exhaustion. The radar showed only one left, one enemy circling at distance. She knew they were both running low on fuel. This would be the last dance. Below, the base braced for impact. The enemy formation on radar had dwindled to one, but that one was turning toward them, straight toward the airbase. The commander's face drained of color. "He's going for the runway." Zara heard it too. "Not on my watch," she said. She turned her F-16 and followed him into the darkness. The final enemy jet raced low over the mountains, hugging the terrain to stay under radar. It was heading straight for the airbase, armed and desperate. Zara knew that if it reached the base, hundreds on the ground would die. Mechanics, medics, radio operators, people who had no idea she was even fighting for them. Her fuel warning light blinked. One tank nearly empty, but retreat wasn't an option. She throttled forward, chasing the MiG through valleys lit by moonlight. The camera would follow both aircraft weaving between jagged peaks, their afterburners glowing like two comets fighting gravity. Inside her cockpit, the altimeter spun wildly. The terrain alarm blared. Zara flew lower, her jet almost kissing the treetops. She could see the enemy's exhaust trail ahead, shimmering in the cold air. Her hand tightened around the stick. She whispered under her breath, "Come on, Dad. Guide me home." Guide. The MiG pilot must have realized she was behind him because he broke hard left, releasing countermeasures. Flares burst in every direction. Zara reacted instantly, climbing, then diving again, shaking off the confusion. Her heart pounded in her chest. The distance closed. 3 miles. 2. 1. She got tone. Missile ready. But her radar suddenly screamed. The MiG had reversed and locked onto her instead. Both fired at the same time. The camera slows, 2 missiles crossing in midair like intersecting fates. Zara pulled the stick, straining every muscle as her missile struck first. The explosion ripped the night apart. Shrapnel tore across the sky, some pieces striking her jet. Warning lights filled the cockpit. The F-16 rolled violently, smoke trailing from its wing. Inside, alarms blared. Her vision blurred. The ground spun beneath her like a storm of shadows. She fought the controls, teeth clenched, voice trembling. Falcon 21 hit. I repeat, hit. Losing altitude. On the ground, panic erupted. The commander shouted into the mic, "Eject, Zara! Do you copy? Eject!" She didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the distant glow of the runway, flickering through the haze. She wasn't done yet, not when her base was still standing. She forced the jet upright, hydraulics screaming, smoke pouring from the engine. The runway lights came into view. "Come on, girl," she whispered to the jet. "Just a little further." The runway looked impossibly small through the cracked canopy, glowing faintly in the smoky night. The F-16 shuddered, warning alarms screaming like a chorus of dying engines. Zara's hands trembled on the controls, her right arm numb from the G-forces. The aircraft had lost partial hydraulics, one aileron jammed, fuel bleeding fast. Her oxygen mask fogged as she breathed heavier, the edges of her vision fading into gray. Below, fire trucks and ambulances lined the airstrip, their sirens slicing through the dark. The control tower was a storm of shouting voices, but only one mattered. The commander's voice, raw, pleading. "Zara, pull up. You're coming in too steep." The camera would shake as the jet dipped dangerously low, its landing gear struggling to deploy. Sparks flew as the wheels locked halfway, one side stuck. Zara's jaw clenched. Come on," she whispered, forcing the lever again. It clicked. The gear dropped just in time. She hit the runway at an angle, the tires exploding on impact. The F-16 screamed across the tarmac, metal scraping, smoke trailing like a comet's tail. Then, silence. The aircraft came to rest at the far end of the runway, broken but intact. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, as the canopy hissed open, Zara climbed out, her flight suit scorched, her helmet cracked, but her eyes steady, alive. The wind whipped through her hair as she took her first breath of ground air. The camera would track her slow walk toward the rescue crews, her silhouette framed by the burning horizon. Firefighters rushed forward, shouting, but she just raised one hand, signaling she was fine. The commander ran toward her, disbelief written all over his face. You brought it back," he said, voice breaking. She just nodded faintly. "Couldn't let him hit home." Behind them, the wrecked F-16 hissed and popped, the last of its heat fading into the night. And across the base, soldiers and mechanics stood frozen, realization washing over them like a wave. The quiet officer from logistics was the one who had saved them all. But even as relief spread, Zara's eyes drifted toward the sky. Her mission report wasn't over. Radar still showed faint echoes, enemy drones now approaching for retaliation. She turned back to the commander, her voice firm but soft. "We're not done yet." Her exhaustion didn't matter. Her courage had already outflown the impossible. By dawn, the base was silent again, the kind of silence that comes after a miracle. The sky was a pale wash of gray and smoke. Mechanics were still clearing debris from the runway when the first sunlight broke through. Zara sat on the back of an ambulance, a bandage around her shoulder, sipping water in silence. Her flight suit was torn, streaked with oil and blood, but her posture remained upright, composed. The commander approached, eyes weary but filled with something close to awe. "You should be in the hospital," he said. She smiled faintly. "I'll go once the jets are ready." He looked at her, shaking his head. "You downed 4 MiGs in one night alone. You don't need to prove anything else." The camera would linger on her face, calm, distant, unreadable. Her gaze wandered toward the damaged F-16 being towed across the tarmac. Its tail number, 3021, was still visible, glinting under sunlight. "It wasn't me," she said quietly. "It was her. She held together when everything said she shouldn't." Inside the command bunker, the after-action team pieced together the radar logs. They confirmed what everyone was whispering: 1 pilot, 4 kills, and a crippled aircraft flown home against every rule of physics. Someone asked, almost reverently, "Who trained her?" The commander answered softly, "Her father," before he went down. That name, Qureshi, carried weight. And suddenly, everyone remembered the man lost 2 years ago, the one who used to tell young cadets, "Courage isn't loud, it's steady." Outside, Zara walked along the tarmac where her jet had stopped. The morning wind carried faint echoes of what happened: explosions, radio static, her father's voice in memory. She touched the jet's wing gently, whispering, "You brought me back." But she knew this wasn't over. Intelligence reports came in, enemy losses confirmed, but also signs of a retaliatory airstrike forming at the border. She stood quietly for a moment, eyes fixed on the horizon. The dawn that should have meant peace instead whispered another challenge. She exhaled deeply, turning to the hangar crew. "Prep another jet," she said softly. The crew froze. "Ma'am, you can't fly again." She didn't answer. Her silence was all the permission she needed. The sun climbed higher, painting the sky gold, but there was no peace in that light. The airbase moved like a wounded animal, recovering yet bracing for another strike. Radar screens flickered with new signatures, faint but certain. More enemy aircraft were forming at the border, maybe a counterattack. The commander barked new orders, but there weren't enough pilots, not enough jets ready to launch. Inside the hangar, Zara stood before another F-16. This one was freshly armed but untested since maintenance. Her shoulder throbbed beneath the bandage. The medic tried to stop her, but she gently moved his hand aside. "They're coming again," she said quietly. "We either meet them in the sky or they meet us here." The camera would glide around her as she climbed the ladder into the cockpit, the morning light catching the scratches on her helmet, reminders of the night before. Mechanics watched in silence. Every motion she made was slow, deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if she wasn't just preparing for flight, but saying goodbye. Over the intercom, the commander's voice broke through. "Zara, you've done enough. You can stand down." Her reply was calm but resolute. "If they come back, I want them to remember who owns this sky." The jet's canopy lowered with a hiss, sealing her once again in that narrow space between life and eternity. Engines roared, wind whipping dust across the tarmac. The tower cleared her reluctantly for takeoff. And as the wheels lifted, the camera would tilt upward, following the jet into the glare of the rising sun, a phoenix against the light. Minutes later, she was airborne again, scanning the horizon. The enemy didn't cross the border this time. Maybe they were regrouping, or maybe the story of one lone pilot had already reached them. But she kept circling, watchful, protective, not as a soldier seeking glory, but as a guardian of her home. Her father's words returned to her, clearer than ever. "Courage is not fighting because you must. It's standing watch because others can't." Below, the base crews looked up, shielding their eyes, watching her contrail drift like a white line of hope across the morning sky. They didn't cheer. They just stood quietly, knowing they were witnessing something sacred, a living promise. As her patrol ended, Zara turned her jet toward the horizon, voice soft over the radio. Falcon 21 returning to base. Airspace secure. Her tone carried no